And final bill on the agenda for today is House File 771, authored by Representative Kraft, who is making his way to the testifier table. So to save time, I will move that House File 771 be laid over for possible inclusion. And Representative Kraft does have an author's amendment coded the DE2. So Representative Kraft moves the DE2 to get the bill in the shape he would like to have it considered. Any discussion to the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. Motion prevails, and the amendment is adopted. With that, Representative Kraft, please go ahead and tell us about your bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, I'm happy to be carrying House File 771 that would create a supplemental grant program to build on the Federal Low-Income Home Energy Assistance Program, or LIHEAP. LIHEAP provides vital relief during the winter and has been doing so for over 40 years. Income-qualified households receive financial assistance to help with heating bills. However, the need is, and has been for many years, way more than what's available. Only about a quarter of eligible Minnesota households receive assistance. And unlike most other states, including even our neighbors in North Dakota, Minnesota does not provide assistance during the summer months. And with our increasing temperatures, cooling needs are just going up. And by the way, the majority of utility shutoffs occur in the summer. So we've worked with all stakeholders to figure out the best way to address the need. This bill would do so by leveraging the existing program and processes already set up under LIHEAP. And you can see from the handouts that the bill has broad support, even from organizations that may not typically agree on much. To summarize the bill, it provides state funding to supplement the federal LIHEAP program. Currently, Minnesota does not provide any funding in this program. It would allow to address more folks, but also to keep the program open during the summer months to help with cooling needs and prevent shutoffs. And it also opens the door for these households to make their bills affordable in a more long-term way, such as with weatherization assistance. Weatherization assistance uses the same application, and other utility affordability programs, which typically require recipients to be receiving energy assistance from LIHEAP. I'd also want to point out that this is primarily a greater Minnesota bill, as 75% of energy assistance today goes to households outside the 7-county metro area, where energy burdens tend to be higher. There is a map in your handout. It's in black and white, so you might not see it as well, but we do have some color ones. One of my testifiers, Annie Levinson-Falk, you should come on up, Annie, has some. And so I would encourage folks to grab a colored handout afterwards so you can see how your districts are impacted. One of the reasons for this outside of the greater metro area is the higher prevalence of delivered fuels, which tend to be substantially more expensive than other alternatives. So with that, I'm going to pass it off to my testifiers.
And welcome to committee, Ms. Levinson-Falk from Citizens Utility Board. I'd like to also invite up Tricia. It looks like she's making her way from MREA. Go ahead, Ms. Levinson-Falk.
Thank you, Chair Acom, Chair Swedzinski, and committee members. My name is Annie Levinson-Falk. I'm the Executive Director of the Citizens Utility Board of Minnesota, which is a nonprofit advocate for energy consumers. We've been working on this proposal since 2022 with many of the supporters that you see listed on the handout in your packet. Members who served on this committee in last biennium might remember hearing it in 2023. The bill addresses an important need, and we appreciate you taking the time for today's hearing. For too many households, the cost of energy has been and continues to be unaffordable. A good measure of affordability is energy burden, the percent of household income that's spent on energy, and this figure is very high for many Minnesotans, as Representative Kraft said, particularly in rural areas with lower incomes and higher energy costs. A rough rule of thumb is that an energy burden between about 4 to 6% is considered affordable, and anything above 6 is usually considered energy burdened. And you can see on that map that there are large portions of greater Minnesota, in particular where the average household spending is more than this. So it's a really, when I saw that map, I found it to be really striking. Affordability challenges were exacerbated in the years following the pandemic when many Minnesotans faced financial strains. We saw utility arrears go way up. And those figures have come down somewhat since their peak, particularly helped by the natural gas prices coming back down to a more of a quote-unquote normal level. But customers of the regulated utilities in Minnesota still owe $130 million in past due bills. And that figure doesn't include customers of cooperative and municipal utilities or households that might struggle to get together the $800 or $900 that you need for a propane tank refill or others that are depending on delivered fuels. With the compounding pressures of inflation going up, housing costs going up, households that were having trouble before are falling farther behind on bills. Unfortunately, utility shutoffs are also way up. In 2024, more than 91,000 Minnesota households were disconnected for non-payment. The Citizens Utility Board has tracked this data going back a decade, and that far exceeds any year for which we have data. Most of the shutoffs occur between June and September after the cold weather rule protections expire and when energy assistance is not available. Facing a utility shutoff can have really severe effects on a household. According to national research, a third of Americans have gone without necessities like food or medicine in order to pay utility bills. 69% of Americans who took out a payday loan did so in order to pay a regular expense like a utility bill. And when there are heat waves or cold snaps, demand for payday loans surges. Lack of cooling during periods of extreme heat can be a serious health risk, particularly for seniors and other vulnerable individuals. And cooling needs have increased dramatically in Minnesota in the 45 years since the Energy Assistance Program began. The average Twin Cities summer now requires 43% more cooling than it did in the early 80s. This is why the majority of states provide energy assistance in the summer, including other northern states, like, as Representative Kraft said, North Dakota. We've worked hard with utilities, service providers, low-income advocacy groups, and dozens of stakeholders to provide a proposal to address these problems in an efficient manner. We understand that the budget pressures that the state is under this year and appreciate your consideration of this pressing need should funding be available.
Thank you. Next, we have Tricia Leet with MREA. Go ahead and introduce yourself for the record and proceed.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and committee members. My name is Tricia Leet, and I'm the Government Affairs Representative for the Minnesota Rural Electric Association. We're the statewide association representing 50 member-owned not-for-profit electric cooperatives who provide power to 1.7 million Minnesotans, covering 85% of the state's geography. Thank you, Representative Kraft, for bringing House File 771 forward to address the critical issue of keeping electricity on and affordable for all Minnesotans. Electric cooperatives strive to deliver reliable, affordable, and safe electricity and are member-driven in this mission. Costs for basic services like electricity fall the hardest on low-income Minnesotans, and electric cooperatives serve some of the poorest counties in the state. Over the past few years, we have seen high inflation put upward pressure on goods and services across the economy, including energy. Minnesotans are feeling this pinch across the state, with more Minnesotans falling further behind on their energy bills than ever. Every year we see a trend where our past due receivables build from the end of summer, when electric bills can be some of the highest, into October, when energy assistance resources become available. Making these resources available throughout the year would allow us to provide better support to our members and reduce the number of disconnects that occur annually. This change would also level out the demand for these resources, which in turn help improve service and response time for recipients. We appreciate the committee's focus on proposals like HF771 that address the affordability of essential electricity. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today.
Thank you for being here. And we're going to next go to Amanda Mackey, who's testifying remotely. So we're going to ask her to unmute herself and go. And while she's testifying, maybe Mr. Sulam can make his way to the testifying table. So Ms. Mackey, go ahead and proceed. Introduce yourself for the record and proceed.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and committee members. My name is Amanda Mackey, and I'm the Executive Director of Minnesota Valley Action Council. We're the community action agency that delivers LIHEAP to the 9 counties in south central Minnesota. MVAC provided energy assistance to 9,200 households last year, ensuring that families and seniors could remain warm during our cold Minnesota winters. I'm here to support House File 771 to expand on the federal low-income home energy assistance program to include benefits in the summer months. As you know, we're lucky enough to experience both extremes of summer heat and winter cold here, which places a significant burden on our low-income households. At this time, we're only able to relieve a portion of this burden during winter months due to the lack of funding. Federal funding levels have dropped below what they were 15 years ago. This means smaller grants for households while energy costs continue to rise. In January, Excel proposed a nearly 10% increase in rates for 2025, and as a previous testifier mentioned, we also work with many delivered fuel vendors who have been increasing prices as well. Meanwhile, our customers are not experiencing corresponding increases in wages, especially our seniors who are on fixed incomes, which are the majority of our LIHEAP applicants. Some report having to choose between paying for their medicine or their heat, a choice no one should have to make in Minnesota. It's also critical to recognize that the lower funding levels reduces the resources that our agencies have to deliver these services, as we work with 2010 level funding to attempt to pay 2025 wages. This means we're employing fewer staff to deliver the same level of service and to process the same number of applications, which means a delay in service. We, like many energy assistance service providers, have to lay off our staff in the summer once the program season has ended. This means we're hiring temporary staff to deliver the program, increasing training and ramp-up time each fall. This bill will help address some of these barriers by expanding assistance to cover the cooling season and allowing us to maintain consistent staff running through the program year, which is a formula for a more efficient program. At the end of the normal energy assistance season, when the cold weather rule expires, we always see a significant increase in shutoffs and big utility bills, some in the thousands of dollars. These arrive in June when the cooling season begins and households can't afford that increase in electric costs. The majority of MVAC's service area is rural, with an aging housing stock that averages well over 40 years old. This means less energy efficient dwellings that create an overburdening of costs for heating and cooling. In addition to this, I want to share just a short story of the impact energy assistance can have on one of our clients. Jean came to MVAC with a shutoff notice last February from her heat vendor after her partner Jim passed away. She found herself unable to keep up with all of her bills, explaining that she'd been a longtime caregiver and hadn't worked outside the home in many years. Her small Social Security check, and she had a small Social Security check, but she had no partner benefits because they never married. And she was embarrassed about asking for help because she had never needed this in the past. She covered her mouth with her hand when she spoke to us because she had several broken and missing teeth. So we helped her to get her heat turned back on that day with crisis funds. And because we're a community action agency, we connected her with our senior employment program. She began working in our thrift store as part of a subsidized employment program, but she was such a great worker, she was quickly hired on as a regular employee with full benefits. In December, she came into my office to show off her new dentures that she was now able to afford with her dental insurance and income, and she could not stop smiling through her happy tears. She credits energy assistance not just with helping her with her bills, but helping her turn her life around and maintain her independence. Thank you for the opportunity to share my support of this important bill. I urge this committee to advance and ensure that Minnesota is able to provide a year-round robust energy program to support some of our most vulnerable households.
Thank you,
Thank
Ms.
you.
Mackey. And last testifier, Mr. Solom. Thank you for being here. Go ahead and introduce yourself for the record and proceed.
Chair Combs, Chair Czynski, members of the committee. I'm Ken Solom, Director of Government Relations and Senior Counsel for the Minnesota Municipal Utilities Association. We too lend our support to this bill. I'm not going to repeat the testimony that's been said, but I also add an angle of not only is it helpful to the recipient of the funds and what they can do getting out from under their burdensome bills, but it helps the utilities at the municipal level keep their rates lower because you don't have to pass the default payment on to others. At the municipal level, our rates are basically passed through. What our costs are become the bills for the consumers. And so by having an emergency backup system to help pay the bills for those who fall into hard times, it allows everything to remain a steadier level and therefore keep increases from occurring from those unpaid bills. So we've very supportive of this bill and hope that you'll be able to give it serious consideration as the omnibus is put together. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Solom. As I look to my colleagues for questions, I have a quick one. And it was touched on by Ms. Mackey, who indicated that federal funding is about 15% down compared to previous years in the LIHEAP program. And so given some of the uncertainty at the federal level, how does the funding currently look towards LIHEAP coming here to Minnesota? So I bet that would go to Ms. Levinson-Falk.
Thank you, Chair Akam, and I know there at least were folks from Commerce that could probably definitely could provide more information than me. But my understanding is that, and he can correct me if I'm wrong, that Minnesota received about 90% of this year's appropriation already, and the other 10% was just passed in the congressional CR that just passed. So for this year, I think we're expecting full funding. There's a lot of uncertainty going forward.
I appreciate that, and Commerce has made their way to the table, so maybe you can fill us in with a little bit more detail.
Thank you, Chair Akam, members. My name is Michael Schmitz. I'm the Director of the Energy Assistance Program for the Minnesota Department of Commerce. So we've received about $112 million so far this year. As was indicated, we are expecting some additional funds from the recently passed continuing resolution. Waiting for that money, though, we do expect to potentially run short of additional funds before that money does come. And so we're really hopeful that it comes soon. But yes, the funding is more limited than it has been in the past.
And so, Mr. Schmitz, how does that $112 million compare to previous years?
So last year, we received $125 million. The year before that, it was about $160 million. And then the year before that, as part of the American Rescue Plan, plus our regular LIHEAP funding, it was over $250 million. So you can see it's gone down very dramatically recently, but it's been very stable at this between 115 to 120 million for over 15 years. And when you take into consideration inflation, that's really a decreasing amount.
That's great. I appreciate that. Just helps kind of frame the discussion and the challenge that we're having here. And while I know this is going to be a challenging budget year, I think it's typically programs like this are something in committee we learn about early on in session as we learn about some of the programs that are offered and the stakeholders that are a part of this committee. And since we have a little bit of an atypical session, I thought it was important that we get this bill in front of the committee and in front of members to be able to kind of see the issue, and so we can all be thinking creatively about how we can work to address this issue. And so we do have questions from a few members. We're going to start with Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick question. I thought it was interesting you mentioned that I thought 43% more cooling in the summertime because of increased heat in Minneapolis or Minnesota. What about in the wintertime? Has there been less heating necessitated because of warmer weather?
Who would like to take that? Representative Kraft?
Madam Chair, I'm actually not sure of the balance in that. If heating needs have gone down, I imagine at some net level they have. I think that with the level of need that's needed, there probably is still more need that can be met. But your point is just from a logic perspective, one would think that the heating needs are a bit less and the cooling needs are a bit more.
Any follow-up? No? Mr. Schmidt, did you want to add to that?
Yes, Chair Akam, members. So I can't tell you for the entire state, but for the folks who apply for energy assistance, we track that very carefully, and we use their energy costs as the basis for determining the benefit amount. And we have seen those costs increase, and I think it's more because of the cost of fuel has been going up. Sure. And it's variable between different fuel types, but overall, the trend has been slightly upward.
Thank you, Mr. Schmitz. That's helpful context. Next question, Representative Jones.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Representative Kraft, for bringing this. I just wanted to make a comment about something that I had heard from the city of Bloomington, particularly around this program, because their city hears about this need in the summertime, and they're unfortunately not able to sign people up during the summertime. The other thing about summer is that's when a lot of cities and communities do community engagement, and so that's the opportunity to really, make sure that people who need this program are being hooked up with that. And so a part that I really appreciate about this as well, besides the money, which is really important, but really just opening that application season as well. So thank you.
That's a good point. And I will just say, I met with, on Hunger Day at the Capitol, I met with a local food shelf that serves part of my community, and they, as a food shelf, work to help with energy costs for folks. And so I think there are a lot of organizations and communities that are working to help assist members or communities. All right, seeing no other questions, last question. Oh, we're going to go to Mr. Weiner first. So close, Chair, almost. You're coming. All right, Representative Weiner.
Anytime I can cut off Chair Swazinski, I guess. Thank you for bringing this bill forward. We had a good discussion yesterday about some of the issues, and I think it really brings up a broader question. You know, if the number you gave, 91,000, that's staggering. You know, in a state that is purported to be so prosperous, why do we have so many people that are needing this? And until we fix the root cause of this problem, then we're putting a Band-Aid fix on it. So when I look at this, I say, why do we have so many people that are using this? Why do we have an increase? And when I look at it, I think over the last 10 years, our state budget has increased from $35 billion to $70 billion. And if you divvy that up per taxpayer, you're over $5,000 a person. How far would that go in those people's lives so that they wouldn't have to get a subsidy? When we look at inflation since COVID, we're looking at a 20% increase. So government has grown, inflation has grown, and then the need has grown. The best way for us to fix this problem is to actually let people keep more of their money so that we don't have to have them looking for subsidies. My area, Todd County, Wadena, is a couple of the poorest counties in the state. When their property taxes have increased 20, 30, 40%, they have a harder time paying these bills. And you know what they'd rather have? Just more money in their pocket so that they could pay their bills themselves. And I think until we really look at the core or the root cause of these problems, we're going to keep putting projects and other things in place, and it's a Band-Aid fix, but it doesn't solve the issue. And I would like to help solve the issue rather than keep putting Band-Aids on it. I would like to make sure that that 91,000 goes down to next to nothing. And we can do that, I think, when we say we look at our budget. Yes, we absolutely have to. When it's increased so much over the last 10 years, like I said, and over the last 2 years especially, I believe in Minnesota. I believe in Minnesotans. I believe they know what's best to do with their money. But when we tax them to the point where they can't afford their bills, then we're really crushing that entrepreneurial, that Minnesota spirit, and I think that's what we need to look at. Because I want to make sure that that 91,000 gets down to zero. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And I will just say I have that, before I pass it over to Representative Kraft, I have that same goal. I would love for us to get that number down to zero. And I will also say I find it unfortunate that Minnesota is a net contributor to the federal government. We give a lot more in taxes to the federal government than we get back in services. And I would like to even that playing field. And so with that, Representative Kraft, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Representative Weiner, I share your goal. And I also share your inclination to address root cause. Where we differ is on root cause. The people that we're talking about here that aren't able to pay their energy bills are generally ones in the state that probably have fairly low tax burdens because their incomes are so low. The issue here, like your really core issue, is that people's incomes are not high enough. That, you know, if you look at around the country, right, what's happened over the past decades is that our income gap and wealth gap has grown and grown and grown. The top 10% of Americans hold 70% of U.S. wealth. The richest 1% in this country makes 139 times as much as the bottom 20%. Right? If we really want to address this root cause in Minnesota, not, you know, we can't be doing things What we need to be looking at is things like enhancing the child tax credit, which we did, and even more, and things that we can do to help those least fortunate among us to address these issues, which is things that I think we've been trying to do. What we should not be doing is what seems to be often the answer, at least at the federal level, is let's do tax cuts for the wealthy. The wealthy are doing fine and are able to pay their energy bills, are able to afford their food, are able to afford their housing. It's the folks at the lower end that are not. This is screaming out for action, and it's screaming out for truly addressing poverty. So thank you.
Thank you, Representative. And last questions or comments by Chair Swedzinski.
Certainly. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Representative Kraft, for the bill. Just kind of, this would be maybe to Department of Commerce, but it's just kind of from the new program standpoint in LIHEAP, just because it is a federal program, it's pass-through dollars. How much of the dollars go directly to homeowners? And then how much actually go to potentially ratepayer, either like utilities and or propane type business? How does that process kind of get funneled out?
Mr. Schmitz.
Chair Aiken, Chair Swedzinski, members, I think that's a great question. And the way that the program is designed, almost all of the benefits for homeowners actually go to the utilities so that they pay the energy bills directly. And so for the most part, we're not making direct payments to households, if that answers your question.
Chair Swedzinski.
Thank you. Madam Chair, you said indirect payments to households or direct payments?
We generally don't make direct payments to households as
Yes.
kind of a waste, fraud, and abuse measure. So to go to the utility instead so that it goes right to the energy costs.
Yep. So Madam Chair, so my understanding is that the dollars go straight from the LIHEAP program to the utility, and then that dollar is
Credited.
credited right to that account, right to that payment. And then, Madam Chair, and then also to the fine man from the Commerce Department, looking at one of the testifiers talked about $138 million of utility bills. I think that was just for potentially for rural electrics. What do we see statewide when it comes to unpaid utility bills that are ultimately getting passed on to other ratepayers? Do we track that? Is that part of the process? And kind of where have you looked at that number and you track that within the department?
Mr. Schmitz, do you have that information?
I think that the number that was presented earlier is the number that we have for the regulated utilities, and then they're required to report on that, and then the other utilities and then delivered fuels don't report on those amounts, so we don't really have that information.
Sounds good.
Chair Swedzinski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And then just kind of looking at from a cost perspective, if you look at Representative Baker's bill with the net metering bill, when we're looking at cost shifts from one ratepayer to the next, that's a particular area that whether we have a government program that does it, I mean, this is a prime example of who really does pay those bills. And Representative Baker, I appreciate your work on that bill, but those are a cost shift. And so ultimately, those are cost shifts that go on to lower income people. Government comes in, pays those people directly when they can't pay their higher utility bills, and then when they don't pay their utility bills, then those costs get shifted onto others, whether that's industrial users or the rest. And then, from a cost perspective, if we're already seeing $138 million in utility bills, that's kind of your baseline. When you're looking at the 5 or 6 different things that are kind of first on their list, it's obviously your heating bill, electric bill, cell phone probably in the line, and then also how do you property tax, and then also how do you actually get to work? So your gas or car or utility, what are the base modes of that? So if we're already seeing $138 million, we can either, as Representative Wiener talked about, we could throw a Band-Aid on this, or we could actually go after what is driving the cost of energy up. Is it net metering? And can we have reform in that particular area? Is it eliminating the RDA? That's a tax of $30 or $40 million that could be going back to ratepayers. SIP program, that's 1.5% of every utility bill across the state to be told and how to spend that money rather than just putting those dollars back into in a new era when we have a 2040 bill, carbon-free. If it's to reduce energy use, when we're talking about electrifying the grid, and ultimately the electricity that will be flowing into homes is a carbon-free form of electricity, does it behoove the state then to get out of the way once again And then ultimately, when it comes to addressing the costs of dollars going into people's homes, from their job back home, levering a new tax on a new program. When it comes to earn sick and safe time, when it comes to paid family leave, we're talking 1, 2, 3 percentages of people's individual income who are already not able to pay their bills. That is getting passed on to other people, that they're going to have less and less dollars. And so when the government's going to come in first, take that 2 or 3% off folks' paycheck, because we decided how to pay that money first, when we decided how to spend that money first before it gets into their house. So all those dollars are going to come out of programs just like this, whether it's $138 million of unpaid electric bills. That's the decisions that we're making. When we put St. Paul in front of houses, whether that's electrical policy, whether that's labor policy, whether that's driving a wedge between employees and employers, that's what we're doing. Day after day, policy after policy, and why it may not have a large cost on the bottom line of this committee, it has a large cost on the bottom line of businesses, families, and industry across the state. And how that's going to affect people's pocketbooks is yet to be seen. And so I appreciate this bill. It sounds like we're already short when it comes to winter, when it comes to the amount of need versus that. So I question in general whether or not we should be expanding it into summer when we already don't have the primary use for winter satisfaction on these dollars. But we do have a responsibility to taxpayers and ratepayers. And ultimately, when it comes to those baseline expenditures, when it comes to energy, when we have other things in the Department of Labor that Representative Baker is dealing with in a couple different avenues, I think we really should let's sit down, let's relax, let's look at finding some bipartisan support that will ultimately not just put Band-Aids, but let's solve issues. And with that, thank you.
Seeing no question, any closing comments, Representative Kraft?
Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members for the discussion. While this is about energy assistance, it really is about housing, health, and family stability. The American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy, nonprofit research organization, researched energy burden in 2020 and found that high energy burdens are correlated with greater risk for respiratory diseases, increased stress and economic hardship, and difficulty in moving out of poverty. This is an important and targeted program for households who really need the assistance. This is a program we should do. But I do want to, I'm not surprised with the comments. I think there's some things we can build on here with the comments of, this is a indicator that we should get out of all these other programs that actually benefit Minnesotans' lives. No, what this is a canary in the coal mine for is that we need to address poverty, right? This is not the energy bills are too high. This is people don't make enough. And that's the kind of thing that we need to invest in to address this. That's the root cause. So thank you very much for your time, and I appreciate you laying this over.
Thank you, Representative Kraft. With that, the bill is laid over.